Virgo, uh, before we start, I need you to ground yourself. Whatever story you've been telling yourself about this person, whatever assumptions you've made about where you stand with them, put it aside for a moment. Just be present, because what I'm about to share might challenge everything you think you know. Okay, so let's go. Stop. Take a breath for a second, because what I'm about to tell you is going to mess with the narrative you've been running in your head, the story you've been telling yourself about this person, about how they see you, about what you mean to them, about whether they even think about you at all. That story, it's incomplete. And I need you to stay with me while I fill in the pieces you've been missing. Because there's someone in your life, or someone who used to be in your life, or someone who's been circling at the edges of your life. And the way you think they feel about you, the assumptions you've made about their level of interest, the conclusions you've drawn about their intentions, they're not accurate, not even close. Stay present, because this person, the one you've convinced yourself doesn't care that much, the one you think has moved on, the one you believe is completely unbothered by your absence, they're struggling, they're thinking about you more than you realize. They're fighting the urge to reach out more often than you know. They're carrying feelings they haven't expressed and don't quite know how to handle. And you, you have no idea. Have you been telling yourself a story about how this person feels that might not be true? Let me know in the comments if this is already landing. Because here's what I keep picking up on in the energy around this connection. There's a gap, a massive gap between what this person is actually feeling and what they're showing you, between the internal experience they're having and the external face they're presenting, between how much you occupy their thoughts and how little they've let you see that. And that gap, it's created a false reality for you. A reality where you think you know where you stand, where you think you understand the dynamic, where you've made peace with the idea that whatever existed between you, it wasn't that deep for them. But you're wrong. It was deep. It is deep. It's deeper than they've admitted and deeper than you've allowed yourself to believe. And right now, in this present moment, they're sitting with that depth. They're feeling the weight of it. They're realizing that what they thought they could just walk away from, what they assumed would fade with distance, it hasn't faded. If anything, it's gotten stronger. Does this feel possible? Does this challenge what you've been believing? Drop a comment if you're recognizing this, because let me tell you what I'm sensing about what's actually happening with this person right now. They're obsessing. That's the word that keeps coming through. Obsessing. Not in a healthy, balanced way. Not in a casual, oh, I wonder how they're doing kind of way, but in a consuming, can't stop thinking about you, checking your social media at 2 in the morning kind of way. They're replaying conversations. They're analyzing moments. They're going over interactions, trying to understand what happened, what they missed, what they should have done differently. They're noticing your absence in ways they didn't expect to. They're feeling the gap you left in ways they told themselves they wouldn't. They're comparing other people to you and finding everyone lacking. They're trying to move on and discovering they can't quite manage it. And all of this, they're doing it silently, privately, without you knowing, because they're proud, or scared, or convinced you've moved on, or not sure you'd even want to hear from them. But the feelings, they're there. intense, present, demanding attention they keep trying to deny. And here's what's making it worse for them. They thought distance would help. They thought time would diminish this. They thought focusing on other things, other people, other possibilities would make what they feel for you fade into background noise. But it hasn't worked. Every day that passes, every attempt to move forward, every effort to convince themselves that what you had wasn't special, it just reinforces the opposite. It just makes them realize how rare what existed between you actually was. And that realization, it's creating desperation. Not the kind they're acting on yet, not the kind that's visible to you, but internal desperation, the kind that makes them pick up their phone to text you and then put it down, the kind that makes them draft messages they never send, the kind that makes them rehearse conversations they're too afraid to actually have. Have you been sensing energy from this person even though they're not actively in contact? Let me know in the comments, because here's what I need you to understand about this obsession they're experiencing. It's not about you being perfect. It's not about you being the only person they could ever want. It's not about some fairy tale idea of destiny or soulmates. It's about you being real with them in ways other people aren't. It's about the connection you had feeling different than what they experienced elsewhere. It's about them realizing through your absence just how much they valued your presence. And that's a painful realization for them, because it means acknowledging they might have made a mistake. It means admitting they didn't appreciate what they had when they had it. It means facing the possibility that they let go of something they actually needed. And people don't like admitting that. People resist that realization as long as they possibly can. So they tell themselves stories. They minimize what you meant. They convince themselves that what they're feeling is just nostalgia or loneliness or temporary sentiment. But underneath those stories, they know. They know this is different. They know what they feel for you isn't ordinary. They know they're lying to themselves when they try to pretend otherwise. And that knowledge, it's eating at them. Does this feel aligned with what you've been intuiting about this person? Comment below if this resonates, because I want to talk about this reaching out energy I'm picking up on. They want to contact you. They're thinking about it constantly. They're looking for reasons, for openings, for signs that it would be okay. But they're stuck. Stuck between want and fear. Stuck between impulse and pride. Stuck between knowing they should reach out and not knowing how. Because what do they say? How do they explain the silence? How do they bridge the gap that's formed? How do they admit they were wrong without making it awkward or putting too much pressure on you? These questions, they're paralyzing them. So they wait, they watch, they hope you'll reach out first so they don't have to take the risk. But you're not reaching out because you've convinced yourself they don't want to hear from you, because you're protecting yourself from potential rejection, because you're tired of being the one who tries. And so you're both stuck, both wanting connection, both afraid to initiate it, both telling yourselves stories about why the other person doesn't care enough, when the truth is you both care more than you're showing. Have you been in this stalemate with someone? Let me know in the comments, because here's what I'm sensing about what's going to break this pattern. Something's going to push them past their fear. Some catalyst, some moment, some realization that the risk of reaching out is smaller than the cost of continuing to live with this regret. Maybe they'll see something that reminds them of you. Maybe they'll hear a song. Maybe they'll have a dream. Maybe they'll just hit a breaking point where the obsession becomes unbearable, but something's going to tip them over the edge from thinking about reaching out to actually doing it. And when that happens, when they finally make contact, when you see their name on your screen after all this silence, you're going to have a choice. You can respond from the hurt, from the part of you that wants them to know they made you wait, that they don't get to just waltz back in whenever they feel like it, that their timing doesn't get to dictate your availability. Or you can respond from curiosity, from the part of you that wonders what they have to say, that's open to hearing their perspective, that hasn't completely closed the door even though you've been hurt. Neither choice is wrong. Neither makes you weak or strong. They're just different paths with different outcomes. But before you can make that choice consciously, you need to get clear about something. What do you actually want with this person? Not what you think you should want, not what makes logical sense, not what your friends would approve of, but what you actually genuinely want when you're honest with yourself. Because if you don't know that, if you haven't gotten clear on your own desires, independent of their actions, you're going to react instead of respond. You're going to make choices from confusion instead of clarity. Have you been avoiding getting clear about what you actually want? Drop a comment if this feels true. Because here's what else I'm sensing about this situation. This person's feelings for you, they're not casual. They're not surface level. They're not the kind of thing that's going to fade just because time passes or distance grows. What they feel, it's significant. It's real. It's the kind of feeling that doesn't just disappear because it's inconvenient or complicated. And part of what's making them obsess, part of what's driving this internal struggle they're having, is that they recognize the significance of it. They know this isn't ordinary. They know they don't feel this way about just anyone. And that recognition, it's both validating and terrifying for them. Validating because it confirms that what you had was special. Terrifying because it means they can't just move on easily, can't just replace you with the next person, can't just forget and move forward. They're stuck with these feelings and they're trying to figure out what to do with them. Does knowing this change anything for you? Let me know in the comments. Because I want to be clear about something important. Just because this person has strong feelings doesn't mean you owe them anything. Just because they're obsessing doesn't mean you have to make it easy for them. Just because they're struggling with your absence doesn't mean you have to fill that absence just to relieve their discomfort. You get to have boundaries. You get to protect your peace. You get to require that if they want access to you, they have to show up differently than they did before. Because feelings without changed behavior, that's just feelings. And feelings alone aren't enough to build healthy connection on. So yes, they might be in love with you. Yes, they might be obsessing over you. Yes, they might desperately want to reach out. But the question isn't whether they feel strongly. The question is whether they're capable of showing up in ways that honor those feelings. Whether they're willing to do the work to address whatever caused the disconnect in the first place. And you won't know that until they actually reach out, until they actually communicate, until they actually demonstrate through action, not just internal obsession, that they're ready for something different? Have you been confusing someone's feelings with their readiness? Comment below if this resonates, because here's what I really want you to take from this. You're more important to this person than you've been believing. You've occupied more space in their mind and heart than they've shown you. The impact you made on them is deeper than the surface level interaction would suggest. And knowing that, it might change how you see yourself, how you value what you brought to that connection, how you understand your own worth. Because sometimes we internalize other people's inability to appreciate us as evidence that we're not worth appreciating. We think if they're not reaching out, it must mean we didn't matter. If they're not fighting for us, it must mean we're not worth fighting for. But that's not true. Sometimes people don't reach out because they're scared. Sometimes